Alright, so this isn't going to have any fancy intro or anything, because this is not a very fancy thing in the first place. Now, I do not know whether or not you have actually watched through the opening of my playthrough of Panzer Dragoon Orta just yet, but for the sake of everybody who wants to have an idea of what's actually going on, I'm going to run through the tutorial and just give a basic idea of how this game works along with its mechanics. Because this game has enough going on that I'm really not going to get the chance to show, or at least tell you, everything about how the basics of the game function while playing it. So, just figured, let you see this little tutorial thing. If you guys don't want to see it, and just don't care how the game works or whatever, or you think you can work without it, don't bother. But since you're watching this, I'm guessing you probably will. So, as you can see, we can lock onto things with the dragon. Release! Boom! And you'll see that there's quite a bit of depth to the lasers, or at least more than one would initially assume. Yay, aiming. Very, very pretty clouds. Boom. See, that's all there is to it. That is one core aspect of the game. But, of course, there are many other core aspects of attacking. There's much more going on at any given time. Yes, timer, I know you're big and dramatic and foreboding, but... So you lock onto a lot more at one time than you might actually expect. But the next lesson... Well, not the next lesson. Is it the next lesson? No. It's the next part of the tutorial that will actually tell us how that laser can vary. But... you tapping the button instead of holding it, you can fire a gun as well. And that does something very important. You can shoot down bullets. I'm going to call them bullets no matter what, regardless of whether they're like toxic saliva or missiles or what. But yeah, you can also dodge stuff, but that's a lot more difficult to do. And actually getting hurt, that kind of hurts. This game's not very kind about respawning either. It gives you a checkpoint at each boss, well, at each major boss, but that's it. Not minor bosses, nothing like that. And each major boss is always at the end of a level too. Can I destroy you by shooting you? Apparently not. So dodging isn't something I really recommend doing most of the time unless you specifically know how to do it, but thankfully shooting things down isn't too hard either. Of course, if this sounds to be too difficult for you to do, there are also other ways to shoot down bullets in certain situations. Oh crap! Well, yeah, I think you're not supposed to run into the enemy in this particular part. So as you can see right there, just trying to shoot everything down on your own does not always work out. You'll see what a little help can be for that if you happen to be in a little bit more of a pickle than I was there, and if you're not so sure you can actually shoot everything down yourself. Pop. 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 Okay, look, one individual laser is quite weak, actually. Although this particular enemy happens to have a lot of health. But yes, your gun doesn't actually do much damage. It's better for shooting down bullets than anything else, but it is still of importance. So, it is great to use while in doing other things. And you need to get into something of a rhythm just shooting your missiles, light missiles, as quickly as possible, while at the same time shooting bullets, either, well yeah, shooting, either to deflect bullets or to try to inflict extra damage. And believe me, it can actually make a difference if you're actually using it for offensive purposes as well. Just not as big as you might hope. Now, this is where things get a little bit more in-depth and enjoyable. One staple of the Panzer Dragoon series is being able to engage in 360-degree rotation. Yes. This is a rail shooter that happens to not give you directions on where to look at any given time. It's not like one of those little arcade games where you're just looking wherever the game tells you to look. You get full domain over where you happen to be facing. And you can use it to look around like usual. But notice that when you're looking forwards, it kind of locks into a separate view. The reason for that is because, well, the controls changed slightly, as the game will probably tell you. Yeah, you can't move while you're not looking forwards. So the game just kind of snaps into looking forwards. And the unfortunate result of that is if you're looking forwards, you can't actually... Yeah, you can get hit. If you are looking forwards, you can't actually look to left or right just by looking left or right, by moving the reticle far enough. But at the same time, if you move the reticle all the way to the right while you're looking to the left, or vice versa, you'll also end up looking forward. So things are kind of off in the diagonal direction to one side. You can have issues with actually managing to... Oh wait. You may end up having some issues in some certain situations with the camera not being too cooperative, but it won't happen much, I promise you. Berserk. This is nice. This is not anything too revolutionary, but it's fun to have regardless. Black button, or in my case... Actually, it's either the black or the white one. Which one you have prefer the most? Or in my case, left to right bumper since I'm playing this on 360. But, whatever. Well, there are some peculiar exceptions to that, but those are more along the lines of exploits. Very, very small ones, but I might manage to mention how you can actually use Berserk attack and not use all of your meter at some point in the game. But there are very, very specific opportunities for doing that, and it's difficult to pull off and doesn't really give you much benefit anyways. But basically, everything on screen takes a little bit of damage. How much damage that is actually depends on how many enemies are on screen. In this case, it's lots of weak enemies, so they all take a small amount of damage, and, well, that's enough to kill them in this case. But if it's a single enemy, that single enemy will take a lot of damage. So, it's rather convenient. Anyways, so now we have something called gliding as well, which also happens to add quite a lot more to be paying attention to in the game. Gliding. It's kind of an odd name for something a lot more important. Now, I'm not sure if the uses that this tutorial lays out are really the most practical ones, but this is actually a lot more valuable to be able to use effectively than some might initially assume. I don't use it as much as I probably should, but it can be incredibly helpful in certain situations. You just also have to know when it can hurt you. So the question is, yay, we can move, but what does it actually do for us? I'm guessing that the game's gonna tell us. Yep, here we go. Before just throwing us into something. For example, when you accelerate, as you can see, you can ram things, and as you saw right there, the hitbox for ramming things is ginormous. You don't have to be anywhere near something to actually damage by ramming it. It does a lot of damage. But generally speaking, you don't want to use it against enemies that have a lot of health anyways. You just use it in a cluster of enemies that you'd have a hard time shooting all at once otherwise. It can actually be incredibly helpful. Come on. So long as your glide meter can recharge quickly enough. And by the way, your glide meter does not normally recharge as quickly as you're seeing right here. It normally takes a good deal longer than that. But it's still recharging, in most cases, way more quickly than you could ever need it. Huh, I kind of figured we covered that in the first part, but okay, using glide. Yes. This is where you get the most use out of it. I myself hardly make any use of this thing in regards to actually using it offensively. I'm not sure if it really has that much use. And this is an odd use right here. Yeah. You can use it to just make sure you don't ram into an enemy. In most cases, this is if an enemy is actively trying to ram you. But there are very, very few situations in which that's something that happens. Hi. Also notice I actually hurt it at the same time by ramming it. Okay, so you do it a bit more proactively. You'll see that. The key to dodging things by accelerating is to do it very, very early, because you keep your speed up for a good while. The game is designed with the intention of you accelerating a good deal in advance. Because if you do it late, like you saw earlier, it actually doesn't work out as well as you might hope. Any more, or is this just going to be a kind of awkward? Okay. And break, as you can see. which is also useful in its own way, but you don't get the bonus of damaging stuff, so it's slightly less fun. But actually, well, either can have problems. Because what can happen is, when you accelerate or decelerate, you end up being a little bit off the track that you're supposed to be on in any given level, and as a result, things can ram you when they're not supposed to. An enemy can, for example, when it's supposed to appear behind you, just ram straight into you if you use a brake at the wrong time. Same thing for going further ahead by accelerating, because you stay ahead for a good few seconds. So that's a big part of knowing when you can and can't use glides without posing a danger to yourself. It's kind of unfortunate that you can't use it as gung-ho as you might like by just doing whatever, but oh well. And this is probably going to be where you find the vast majority of your usage of glide, moving around a boss. And yes, there are particular attacks that are best dodged with glides. Some of which can really only be dodged with glides, other of which sometimes it's just fun to dodge missiles by gliding. This is also an odd time for the game to tell you about the weakness mark thing, but you will not always be able to find a weakness mark on, or weak point as you might call it, on a boss, but there's oftentimes one. Well, it's really not too hard to find either. Go away! Die! But I haven't killed it yet! I wouldn't call it paramount, but it is incredibly helpful to use. It's paramount to boss fights, but whatever. And lastly, one more big thing. You know, actually is a lot more big than this game would have you think, and by the fact that it didn't tell you about until now, but we have 3 different dragons! Whoa! And yes, they are very, very different to play as. It's not an exaggeration when the game says that they're different in any way, shape, or form. The game doesn't really give you the best description of all of them, but really, it's something you need to try out for yourself and learn. Yeah, mobility, power. Glidewing, people generally refer to glidewing as more defensive than mobility, which is basically how it works. It's about avoiding damage. Which the game will probably demonstrate to you in some way in a few minutes once you get to glidewing. But first we have this. It is neutral. It is the thing you want to be if you're not sure what to do at any given point. You can dish out a decent amount of damage. It can lock onto a lot of stuff, which is a unique skill it has. Nothing can lock onto anywhere near as many enemies at once as this thing. It can, of course, use glides, and it's Berserk. As you saw before, a bunch of lasers. Cool. So, it might kind of feel like the other 2 forms are more specialty forms, which they kind of are, but at the same time, Base Wing also has its specialty, that being doing a bunch of lock-ons, which also gets you a lot of points. Which I probably won't talk much about because I don't pay much attention to points in this game, but still. And yes, Heavy Wing does way more damage. You have fewer lasers total, but the thing is, each of those lasers in total does a lot more damage than Base Wing ever could. Especially in damage per second in general. So it's great to be using on to wreck something as hard as you can. You also find that I use this in many cases where some people would normally use base form, because I'm playing through the game on hard, because things have too much health for base form to effectively take out sometimes. And you saw right there, it's really short, but its Berserk is really nice. In exchange for it having a very unfortunate lack of being able to glide at all. Not that it's really a problem, since you can just conveniently switch to glide form and then glide with the tap of a button. It has an interesting Berserk, which is effective in its own right. No way. I wouldn't use it against small enemies like this, but then again, I don't really use Berserk ever against normal enemies. It has a concentrated aimed beam of laser. You need to know how to use it right, mainly like where to shoot if you want to do an effective amount of damage with it, but it's still really nice. There are many cases where, actually, for technical reasons, Base Wing won't do much damage with its Berserk, so you definitely want to use heavies. Not just because it does more damage in general, but because in specific situations, it'll do a lot more damage to a boss than base would be able to. Look at that. He also do little rolls. We have a glide wing. Yes, as you can see, so you can't actually lock onto anything in the glide wing, but it auto targets on the things, which also includes bullets. Which is what I was talking about earlier with having trouble shooting down all the bullets with base wing. If you're wondering about how well you can shoot down bullets in heavy wing has a gun as well, but it's much slower. So you can shoot down bullets, it's just a little bit more difficult. So you can just shift to glide wing, and then basically just hold the gunfire button, and everything will go away for you, so long as you're aiming in a vague general direction of enemies. It's horrible though, horrible in almost every way for offensive capabilities in regards to almost any enemy. Like you can see here, these ridiculously weak enemies that we've been fighting this entire time, even those are painfully slow to kill with this thing. The shot is horrible. There are specific enemies that have an incredibly small amount of health you might want to take out using this particular wing. But, oh, I've not actually oh, good. Oh, okay. That's the time on it. Okay, I thought it was more of a pass-fail thing, but okay. And lastly, what do we have last? Oh, yeah. So we have levels in this game, too, kind of. Yes, generally from peculiar enemies that have a slightly different color. Those are referred to as carrier enemies. Sometimes from destroying certain parts of the environment as well. Just kind of weird, but... So you can level up. Just cool. You also find that in heavy and glide wing, your appearance will change as you level up too. Base wing doesn't look any different, which is kind of weird, but whatever. Basically, in regards to what it affects, you get a longer Berserk. You get more lock-ons, with the exception of glide form, because glide form can't lock on. I think glide form gets more damage when it uses glide attacks. If you ram something, you do more damage, maybe. So that's what it seems to be from what I've read. But glide wing gets smaller benefits in general. But more lock-ons is great for both for base and heavy, especially heavy, because its total number of lock-ons almost doubles. That's way more damage per second. And, well, it's kind of cool at the same time. And you can do way more damage in one go with a Berserk as well. So, that will be it for our little tutorial, an explanation of the game's mechanics here on our Panzer Dragoon playthrough. So, I'm guessing at this point you've probably at least seen the first episode of this, or at least the beginning of the first episode of this playthrough. If not, cool, go watch it. Because now you understand the game, and in doing that, you have made yourself capable of actually watching someone play through this game, that person being me, preferably, and actually having an idea what's going on. So see you then, guys.